Everyone knows the music industry has undergone huge changes in the last few years, and this inevitably raises a couple of related questions. The first is it still possible to become successful in the music industry today and make a living? And the follow-up question gets raised, how do some established pop stars remain in the business? I think those two questions have the same answer. And to provide the answer, let's look at how some music industry heavyweights achieved and retained success. The main focus of this musical steps walk is Morrissey. So with all that in mind, I'll head over to Manchester to make the most of the gap between the mid-October sunshine and the inevitable Mancunian rain as I walk a particular location pertinent to Morrissey. I'll start now by asking that question I mentioned a moment ago as we go for a walk where it's quiet and dry and talk about precious things. Here's that question. How easy is it to like the art if the associated artist doesn't align with our views? Now, I'm not talking about mild differences of opinion. I'm talking about wild differences of opinion. As this movie progresses, it's probably inevitable that question might morph or develop into further questions such as, is the artist misunderstood? And is creating contentious statements a proven strategy for success? For the moment though, let's think about that initial question. Is it possible to divorce ourselves from the artist's opinions that we vehemently disagree with if we like his or her art? Whilst we consider these questions, I'll haphazardly wander around this delightful mid-October morning sun-dappled square, made famous when a red brick Edwardian building, located just around the corner, appeared on the inside cover of the Smiths' third and critically acclaimed album, The Queen is Dead. We'll see the exact location in a few minutes. As I mentioned, it's just around the corner from this small and quiet park, Regent Square in Salford. A mere 15-second stroll from the ever-cacophonous Regent Road, the A57, that takes traffic in and out of Manchester city centre. I'll step over that way in a moment. Getting back to my question, in terms of music, how easy is it for us to overlook a musician's personal opinions and comments that we oppose if we like their art, in other words, their music? Now obviously good musicians produce great art, and that really should be enough, I suppose. Or do I really think that? Because once the lifestyle and opinions of those musicians are exposed, and if we don't agree with them, do we still feel the same way about their art? As an example, for a period in the mid-1970s, around the time of his 1976 Station to Station album, David Bowie was condemned for apparently expressing favour for fascism. One such example was when he was photographed at the press launch of Station to Station in an open-top German car, wearing clothes redolent of militaristic uniform. This was during one of Bowie's extremely prolonged heavy cocaine addiction periods. Bowie excused himself later by saying he remembers nothing about that time, and he determinedly denounced any inadvertent political positivity for fascism expressed, either in chemically mind-altered ambiguous statements or by the style of clothing worn that was regarded by some as supporting fascism. Part of Bowie's response was he was merely presenting an image. As another example of that question, do Michael Jackson fans overlook the various accusations made about him because they've grown up liking his music? How easy is it to enjoy the music of Michael Jackson if we have knowledge of those accusations? What about musicians that support political views that are not our own? Especially if the views expressed today are antithetical to the views expressed at the start of their music career. Johnny Rotten, formerly of the Sex Pistols, a man that fully understands the power of image and shock tactics, causes much consternation with some of his views today because they seem to be the antithesis of every anti-establishment statement he made in the mid-1970s. How about the main focus of this Musical Steps episode, Morrissey? He's made a number of contentious comments over the years. If we disagree with the comments, do we ignore them because we like the art being produced, the songs? It seems even guitarist and songwriter in the Smiths, Johnny Marr, can't overlook recent statements made and opinions spoken by his former close friend Morrissey. For example, in an interview with Simon Armitage, Morrissey referred to Chinese people as being a subspecies. In isolation, it's hard to defend that word subspecies. However, bearing in mind Morrissey's long-held animal rights views, his perspective is he was actually referring to a population mindset that he opposes, rather than the people themselves, in terms of their cruelty in regard to how they treat animals. Morrissey defended his subspecies comment in a statement. He said, "If anyone has seen the horrific and unwatchable footage of the Chinese cat and dog trade, animals skinned alive, then they could not possibly argue in favour of China as a caring nation." Morrissey continued, "There are no animal protection laws in China, and this results in the worst animal abuse and cruelty on the planet. It is indefensible." So, with that explanation in mind, was Morrissey's subspecies comment merely clumsy and crass? Alternatively, with him being a very intelligent wordsmith, was it purposely provocative to instantly raise awareness and bluntly make his point about animal cruelty? I'm not suggesting this and other provocative statements made by Morrissey were part of a strategy to raise his image. I don't think Morrissey is that facile. Nevertheless, it inadvertently certainly keeps views important to Morrissey firmly in the headlines. Morrissey's interviewer Simon Armitage later said about him, "He's provocative and theatrical, and it was one of dozens of dramatic pronouncements. I'm not an apologist for that kind of remark and couldn't ignore it, but clearly, when it comes to animal rights and animal welfare, he's absolutely unshakable in his beliefs. In his view, if you treat an animal badly, you are less than human. I think that was his point." So, was Morrissey's original comment simply clumsily phrased, rather than racist as some claim? Or was his choice of words an intelligent strategy? For certain, Morrissey vehemently denied accusations of racism. He said, "I abhor racism and oppression or cruelty of any kind, and will not let this pass without being absolutely clear and emphatic. Racism is beyond common sense and has no place in our society." Certainly the majority of Morrissey fans still support him, stating his comments were either misunderstood, misquoted, or purposely skewed as a vendetta against him. After all, Morrissey has never made any secret of his loathing for certain music journalists, especially those at the NME. The irony of this stance is Morrissey wanted to be a full-time writer or music journalist prior to finding success with the Smiths. He frequently wrote letters to the music press until eventually hired for a short period of time by the now-defunct music magazine Record Mirror. Incidentally, at the same time, Morrissey was a huge fan of the Manchester-based soap opera Coronation Street, based on a fictitious northern city road. He even went as far as writing his own scripts and sending them to the producers at Granada TV, though none of his scripts were ever accepted. Now, I don't think it's a coincidence the main road that bounds the northern edge of Regent Square here is called Coronation Street. I suspect it played a part in Morrissey choosing a building at this location for the Smiths to stand outside for the inside cover of The Queen is Dead, that went on to propagate the image of Morrissey being the inner-city poet of Manchester for disillusioned, disaffected and diffident teenagers. I won't reproduce the iconic image here owing to copyright reasons. The photograph can of course be seen on the inside cover of The Queen is Dead. Alternatively, the image is available from the photographer Stephen Wright. That now iconic photograph of ordinariness was taken one icy cold November afternoon in 1985 for the Smiths' soon-to-be-released third album, The Queen is Dead. The black and white photograph, taken beneath a freezing cold monochrome Manchester sky by a nervous photographer taking direction from Morrissey, froze that moment in time into iconic status. Image, therefore, was clearly a useful tool employed by the Smiths, and Morrissey in particular. Incidentally, Morrissey was also responsible for choosing the band name, The Smiths. He said, "It was the most ordinary name, and I thought it was time that the ordinary folk of the world showed their faces." Stephen Wright has said of the Salford Lads Club image, "The Queen is Dead shoot itself was in late November in Salford on a damp, dark day. It should really have been cancelled, as the light was so poor for photography. It's funny that one pose shot on an incredibly dark day in Salford has continued to pleasantly haunt me." At this time in 1985, Morrissey was worshipped by adoring fans and press alike. Morrissey's trenchant views and opinions made him good copy for all the journalists swarming around him. His stance on politicians, religion, and vocal support of Meaty's murder made him stand out from contemporaries such as Duran Duran, a band that seemed only concerned with displaying an image of ostentatious wealth. At this time in the mid-80s, the waterfall of views that flowed from Morrissey's big mouth strikes again lips and acerbic, sardonic, poisonous pen ostensibly appeared to show he was more left-wing than right. So, Morrissey's provocative right-wing comments, or seemingly so, made later in his career, indicate why some fans felt let down by his seemingly complete reversal of his early career principles. But Morrissey often inferred he was neither left or right-wing in terms of politics. It might have seemed he was left-wing because he openly despised Margaret Thatcher. His lyrics to the song Margaret on a Guillotine, from his post-Smiths debut solo album Viva Hate, certainly made Morrissey appear very left-wing. The lyrics see Morrissey repeatedly ask when Thatcher would die. He also says it would be a wonderful dream if Thatcher were to die. Morrissey opens the song with, "The kind people have a wonderful dream, Margaret on the guillotine." He clearly associates himself and people sharing hatred for Thatcher as being decent, as he refers to them as kind. It must be mentioned that Morrissey was not alone in his hatred of Thatcher. Many other artists express similar views in songs, such as Stand Down Margaret by The Beat, Elvis Costello's two songs, Shipbuilding about the Falkland War and Tramp the Dirt Down, about Costello wanting to live long enough to see Thatcher dead so he could metaphorically dance on her grave. Another anti-Thatcher song from the time of the Falklands War was How Does It Feel to Be the Mother of 1,000 Dead by the Essex-based art collective punk band called Crass that promoted anarchism. Crass lived at an anarchist commune in a 16th century cottage called Dial House near Epping in Essex and chose their band name from the lyric The Kids Was Just Crass from David Bowie's Ziggy Stardust. Dial House is a farm cottage that has been a self-sustaining anarchist pacifist open house since 1967 and located in Ongar Great Park. Though there is no direct connection between Crass and Morrissey, it's worth digressing from Morrissey for a moment and looking at the band Crass, because their opinions, statements and methods of creating awareness of their values could help us understand Morrissey's use of contentious comments, and, additionally, how, no matter how unintentional, if a statement or comment can be misunderstood, it most likely will be by some. Ostensibly, that might not seem important, but consider Morrissey's solo song, Jim Jim Falls. That song appears to tell people to commit suicide if they feel that way. It's suggested by many fans the song is more subtle than that, though. The use of lyrical mixed messages to make the listener think hard about an issue is a technique many songwriters have adopted over the years. So, does Morrissey use mixed messages in Jim Jim Falls to express his real intention was to highlight how good living is? It's possible. Nevertheless, some people argue the intended message will likely be lost on someone contemplating suicide, owing to their distressed frame of mind.